Men. I mean, am I right, ladies? I mean, we're either just kind of worthless and good for nothing, or we are single-handedly the source of all evil in the world and probably what's destroying your whole day in life. I mean, that seems to be kind of the cultural approach to men these days. Masculinity seems to be toxic, and everywhere you go, you can turn on Instagram, YouTube, or whatnot and find somebody doing a on-the-street interview where they proceed to go on and explain how the world would be better off if men just kind of disappeared one day, except for those that believe that men shouldn't just disappear, but probably be, tortured before they disappear. But today I have a guest who I've been following on social media for a while. My wife and I both have. And one of the reasons why is because she does one of the best jobs I've ever seen of what she calls women-splaining men to women, where she kind of explains some of the quirks that we do, and she does it in a funny way, and it's like spot on, like every time. But in addition to that, I was shocked because she's a young, modern woman that doesn't seem to hate men, like at all. She actually kind of likes us, and it's just so refreshing. But I wanted to take this opportunity to ask her a whole series of questions that I know our audience is going to be interested in, because there's a lot of guys out there that just feel kind of discouraged. There's also a lot of women out there that feel discouraged, and we're going to try to make sense of this whole mess. So please welcome Lauren Corbett. I just screwed it up. I know I would. Lauren Corbett, a.k.a. the Dadvocate, onto Making the Argument. Lauren, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Lauren, real quick, right off the bat, for anybody in my audience that isn't following you yet and should be, right? Like I definitely should be. Can you give everyone just kind of a brief explanation of kind of like who you are and the work that you're currently doing on social media?
Yeah. So I originally made my account the Dadvocate because I had so many things that I just wanted to educate people on that they might not understand or know about when it comes to family court and what rights men do and actually don't have when it comes to their children in those courts. But then once I started kind of answering so many questions about that, and people really gained an interest in that as a you don't know until you know situation, I kind of started exploring other concepts of things as well when it comes to explaining the world of men through the eyes of someone who's had a pretty successful marriage, I would say, for going on 10 years, and grew up with a brother that I'm very close to, grew up with a father who definitely shaped me into the woman that I am today, and was such a huge support throughout my life. So I feel like I have a pretty good understanding that men are very, very different from us still. I don't think anybody's arguing that. But different doesn't always mean wrong.
Mm-hmm. So what made you passionate? I mean, explain it. I mean, I kind of know the background, but what made you passionate about, custody court and things like that? Because, I mean, you married into it was a blended family, right?
Yes, it became a blended family, I guess. Once we did get married is what they call it. But yeah, that's pretty much the long and short of how I became the Dadvocate, was becoming a stepmom and kind of seeing firsthand, like, wait a minute. So you're telling me that you found out you were going to be a dad, so you moved 250 miles away from your friends, your family, your job, all of your resources and support, so that you could be as close to and as available for your son as you possibly could be as a man, reorchestrated your entire life for this child, and they gave you every other weekend? You have to lose out on 80% of the year, because that's what the math on that is. I don't think a lot of people realize that. I think people kind of understand it like, okay, sometimes when people split, the dad just gets every other weekend, and that's normal. That's perfectly fine. But if you do the math on that, if every other weekend is 20% of the year, by the time the child is 10, they've lost 8 years with their father.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds a whole lot different when you put it that way.
It sure does. No one does the math on that. No one thinks about that. I knew that there were kids who only saw their dad every other weekend growing up, but I never sat down and, broke it down point for point to see what that actually means. And we all know that there's a fatherlessness epidemic. There's enough dads who either walk away or don't even know they have a kid. But what people aren't realizing is that the court systems as they are right now is creating the fatherlessness when the dads are available to be there.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I think there's so much government policy that I think undermines the family in a negative way or provides perverse incentives. And this is one that more and more I have dads contacting our office saying, Nick, we've got to do something about, the custody situation. We've got to do something about how the court looks at the role of the father within a relationship and access to the kids. Because in so many places, Virginia is a little bit different. We're not supposed to have a presumption in either direction. But there are so many states where it's just kind of a foregone conclusion that the mother's going to get custody and the dad's got to fight for access. And one of the things that I think more and more research has been demonstrating over time is fatherless homes are just horrific. The social, economic consequences, the criminal justice consequences are through the roof. It's if you walk into a prison right now, the number one thing that you're probably going to see that connects everybody, connects probably 80% of the people there is a father not being available in the home. And like you said, you've got a situation now where I already think we have policies that harm the family in the first place, but then when you go into the court system, we're exacerbating the problem. So from your experience and what you've seen, what do you think is the justification for the way the courts are currently set up?
Well, I do think that a lot of it is based off of, the tender years doctrine. I almost lost it, but I grabbed it before it could float away. A lot of people don't know about this, but the tender years doctrine was actually put into law and said children should go with the mom, just straight up. They just should. Mothers are the natural caretakers. And it was only abolished, taken out of law, I want to say 40 years ago. So less than the amount of time that women have had access to credit cards. And so we're still complaining about the financial hardships that we're experiencing, given that it wasn't that long ago that we just got credit cards finally. And yet everyone wants to just sweep the tender years doctrine under the rug like, oh, well, it's done and over with. And it's like, you don't think that there are still judges practicing holding on to that mentality? You don't think it's still affecting courts today?
Yeah. Well, so if you don't mind me asking, so how many kids did your husband have when you guys got married?
One. I met my stepson when he was 5, and he's 15 now.
Oh yeah, that's so. Like I grew up. So my parents got divorced, remarried, and the whole deal. So what is if you don't mind, just tell us a little bit. Like what was that like going through that process of and again meeting what would become your future son at age 5.
It's funny too because my husband, he had a great wing woman. I will say this. And if there's anything I can recommend to the young men out there looking for their future wives, it's get an in with someone that she is close to, even like a mildly peripheral friend. Anyone who can put in a semi good word for you will change the influence so much. Like this was a girl who actually used to hate me, but she was like, you should talk to TJ. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I should talk to TJ. but it was funny because I'm getting to know him and I go and check out his Twitter and it says a couple details about him and I see one of the words is father. And I hit her up. I go, whoa. You didn't tell me this guy was a dad. And she goes, isn't his kid so cute? She should. I was like, you would think she was getting paid, but
yeah.
But I gotta say, it was definitely unexpected. Like, definitely not on my bucket list for the year. Like, date a dad. But I'm glad that I gave it a chance. I think it's a really untapped market, to be honest with you. A lot of people, they have to wait years and years to find out what their partner will be like as a dad or as a mom. And this was kind of like a cheat sheet, you get a sneak peek at what you're getting there. So, and I have to say, seeing him every day with his son and seeing the commitment that he had, hearing his story was so much of what did attract me to him in the first place, So, and I tried to do everything right. Like I knew that I was entering a complicated territory. And so I even tried, I wrote the mom of my stepson a letter. And in this letter, I was like, basically, this has got to be weird for you, huh? Like, no little
Yeah.
girl dreams of sharing her kid with some other lady. I'm like, no little girl dreams of growing up to become a stepmom either. And I was like, I just want you to know, I'm not trying to replace you. I'm just like a fun uncle, and if your kid's around me, he's going to know you're the most beautiful, most important, most to be respected woman in his life. I'm not trying to step on any toes here.
Yeah.
And
How was that received?
it was completely ghosted.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I understood that, because I was like, you know what? She doesn't owe me anything. I took everything with grace. But I will say, I think the real pinnacle from when I shifted from, I used to really be the momvocate. My husband will tell you, even when she wouldn't talk to me at all, I was still like, you better make sure that you're paying your child support. And I would take her side in arguments, and I'd be like, well, you gotta be nice to her. She's the right one. She's the mom. But the rule was, this is what she said when he told her that we were getting serious. She said, well, I don't want her around my son until I meet her, and I don't want to meet her. So I basically like hid under a blanket. Like, I just wasn't around the child. We did everything separately. And then one day, after months and months and months of this, with me trying to reach out and be like, is today the day we could get coffee? No?
Yeah.
Okay, what about drinks today? Like, no. And I'm like, okay, it's fine. These things take time. My now husband calls me. He goes, I went to go walk my son to school this morning, and her boyfriend's car has been parked there all night. Apparently, he's just spending the night during the school week, and I haven't even met the guy yet. And so that's when I was like, oh, so the rules have changed. Were there ever rules to begin with? I don't know. Maybe just rules for us. And I think that was when like the dam broke. And it wouldn't be for years and years later that I would even start the TikTok, not even knowing that it would blow up. But for years and years, I didn't even talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not exactly something people want to hear at like Thanksgiving or girls' brunch.
Yeah. Well, can I say something though? Because this is from a guy's perspective, right? From a guy's perspective, especially today. A lot of young men out there just have this expectation that they're not going to get much consideration with respect to a relationship. And so you find yourself in a situation where, you're coming into this, you're in your like mid-20s, right? You didn't necessarily
early,
sign up. Yeah.
Mid to early, I would say.
Yeah. Mid early 20s. Didn't again sign up. And you're going into a situation where, okay, you like the guy. He's got a kid. He's got an ex that isn't exactly friendly. And is making things kind of difficult on you. And this whole time, your attitude is not to say, I don't need this crap, or, screw her, we should just do whatever we want. Like it's you, this whole time you start off by saying, I understand this is it's a interesting situation. I want you to know that this is what I think, this is what I feel. I want to be very respectful to you. You're also having to put up with a scheduling thing that is not your typical dating schedule and things of that nature. So there's got to be a lot of guys watching this going, my gosh, she went out of her way to be as reasonable as possible. Not like, I'm not putting up with this, I'm a queen, like it was, no, this is an interesting situation. I'm coming into it. And again, at this point, it's not like you're married. It's not like you've made a lifelong commitment.
Yeah.
What is it about the way you thought about this from the beginning that caused you to go into it with what everybody I would consider not just an infinitely reasonable position, but going out of your way to be concerned about how other people thought about this situation and trying not to, and being basically very accommodating? What was it?
I mean, I don't know. I guess I was just raised right. Start for start.
Well, let's talk about that. Like, did that have an impact? Like, when you say I was raised right, to go into a situation like this and to be, very considerate. What was it about your upbringing that you think contributed to the way you tackled this situation?
Well, first of all, my parents are still married. And I was sent to Catholic school. So that's pretty much all I ever saw was people who came from still married families. And so the whole idea of like divorce was so foreign to me. So when I entered the situation of, a young man and a young woman who had a child together, but they weren't together, I understood that as like, man, this has got to be so hard for both of them. Like, no one dreams of growing up and being in this situation. And so it was kind of my natural instinct to just handle it as delicately as possible. And I think that also led to me, kind of getting so behind all of the advocacy and championing of talking about these topics as I did, because I'm looking at this like, man, if me and this man can enter the situation so reasonably, like he shows up, pays for the child support, goes out of his way, him and his family helped put her through school and higher education even. And here I am showing up, also trying to do everything right. You can do everything right and still be relegated to like these every other weekend visitors who get no respect, who aren't told when their kid is signed up for sports or when their medication changes or if they're even given a diagnosis for something.
Yeah.
You can still get treated that way. And I was like, people have got to know about this, and this is an issue where a lot of people we talked a little bit about how men's issues, men's problems just aren't really given respect or even any like shown any decency or credence. But it's hard to deny that when it comes to these issues of getting pushed out of the family, it has been an overwhelmingly men's issue.
So so we can look at that and we can say, all right, statistically speaking, the data doesn't lie, right? Hopefully, right? The data doesn't lie. We take a look at it. We look at a situation like this, and you would hope that most people would say, all right, let's look at this reasonably, right? He's done all the right things. Why is he coming up? And the moment you say something on behalf of a man, a lot of the response you get, because I've watched some women that would be considered more of like the fourth wave hardcore feminist side. Even when they come out and say, hey, feminism really can't be about being anti-men, the comments just get flooded with like, oh, look who's a pick-me, and oh, those poor, the poor patriarchy. I feel so bad for them. Why do you think there seems to be this just overwhelming animosity between like feminist culture and just men in general?
You know what I think it is are you familiar with the story of Icarus?
Yes.
I think feminism flew a little too close to the sun in a lot of ways. Is what happened is, we got so carried away with this like women have intrinsic value. We have this divine feminine and we should be worshiped and we should be spoiled and we should be catered to and we should have not only all of the same rights as men, but also more, and it became this thing. And in part of the journey of feminism, which has brought so many amazing things and freedoms and greatness to my life, it's also kind of brought some toxicity, because what ends up happening is we create these very feminist spaces where one person starts complaining about men in some way. It used to be just occasionally complaining about our husbands while having tea at brunch, but now it's people complaining about their husbands on the most popular viral social media platforms in the entire world. And the kind of like domino effect that ends up happening from that is pretty colossal. Like you can even see it in the comments. Women will be like, great, now I'm mad at my husband, or like, great, now I'm going to go start a fight with my husband. And they're not actually joking though.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that seeps in and the kind of collective hive mindset of yeah, men really do weaponize their incompetence, and they don't really, care about domestic engineering like we do. And all of these talking points just kind of are what we use as women to start filling our cup, and it saturates and marinates inside of us. And I've felt it too. If I've spent enough time in these places that are telling me like your man doesn't really love you if he asks you to pay bills and all these kind of wild sentiments, it's like a poison. It
Yeah.
becomes a poison in yourself.
So
It's not true.
well, and it's one of the things I tell guys is don't complain about your wife to your friends. It's one thing for everybody to tell like stereotypical jokes that you would say like in front of your spouse. Some of those I think are perfectly fine, right? There's obviously inherent differences between men and women, and a lot of times that manifests itself in the way we think about things. Like for instance, I love the I love the woman explaining the what is it, the coffee cup or the sink mug?
Sink cup, yes.
Yeah. So explain sink cup real quick, because I want to talk about this concept.
Oh my gosh, yes. So I noticed, and many of my other female friends in my life have noticed, that our husbands do this thing where they just leave a cup right by the sink. And it would always drive me crazy, especially because of the previously mentioned poisons fluttering around in my brain. I would think things to myself like, this is weaponized incompetence. He's doing this on purpose to make me clean up after him. He's not putting it in the dishwasher. He's not putting it in the sink. It's like a declaration that he can do whatever he wants, and I just have to deal with it. It's sick. He's so torturous to me. And then there was one day that I was just at home, kind of cleaning up some things by myself, and I drank the last of my water, and I just kind of in my head placed it down, and I was like, I'm just going to put it here because it's kind of like, if I'm done with it, it's right next to the dishwasher. I can put it there. And if I'm not done with it, it's right next to the sink so I can get more water.
Yes.
And that was when I realized my husband is not out to get me. He's just a genius. It's very different things.
Well, so, okay. Elaborate on this a bit, because I had no idea. Like, first of all, I totally do sink cup, right? I also do like sink fork, and like there's various things where if I know throughout the day, like maybe I'm going outside and then I'm coming back in, and I'm going outside and coming back in. I don't want to use more stuff. I don't want it to get more dirty. I don't want to create more work, yeah. Right? I'm just doing this and then at the end of the day, I'll wash it or throw it in the, and it never, I guess on some level I can understand like somebody looking and seeing that and like, why don't you just put it in the sink, or why don't you just rinse it out and put it away or whatever? But it would have never occurred, I think, to 99% of the male population that this would be the sort of thing that a woman or their wife or whatever else would look at and be like, no, there's a deeper meaning here, right? It's not just, yep. I mean, it's not like I would have understood lazy. But no, it's not just lazy. There's a nefarious, they all put up their bat signal over at the freaking patriarchy headquarters. And yes. This is about asserting dominance. And it's like, ladies, we are not that coordinated. Like we are not.
Yes. Yep.
So what is it about? Do you think part of this is just the way that, men and women, the way I describe it, right? There's masculine traits, there's feminine traits. Those traits can manifest themselves in positive ways or negative ways. And the goal is to try to train yourself to manifest your traits in positive ways. Do you think that this is something where this is a feminine trait with the way that women think about things and connect things in ways that men don't, just going in a negative direction? Or do you think it's something different?
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't want to give away like too much of the magic of womansplaining, but I feel like 99% of the episodes can basically be explained with like assume positive intent, right? And I think that's like a big missing piece. And I couldn't tell you exactly where it comes from or why we so often just like jump to these negative conclusions, but I will tell you it's remarkably common. You know, like I look back at my own childhood and I realized that I was womansplaining to my mom long before I was womansplaining to the internet. Because, you know, we'd be in the car and I remember my mom saying things like, your father didn't clean the bathroom again. And I don't know why he's doing this. I don't know if he's trying to punish me for something, if he's mad at me about something. And I'm like, Mom, I think he just forgot. I don't think it's that deep at all. I think he started playing solitaire and got lost in the sauce.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because there is something that you can look at biologically and say that, you know, Jordan Peterson talks to us a lot about that women are more prone to like negative feelings or thoughts. And
yes,
some of that
that is true.
And some of that you can look at as a defense mechanism, right? Like if you're actually more like physically vulnerable out in society, right? Well, then you're going to be more cautious. You're going to be thinking about risks more, because if the risk has a higher impact on you. And it's the same thing for men when you put them into a certain environment. When I was in Iraq, I had a lot more negative thoughts, right? Because I'm walking down the street where I can get shot at, right? Whereas I don't have those negative thoughts when I'm walking in most of America. Maybe not like Detroit, but like, you know, in most places I don't have to have those thoughts. But so if you're prone to it, then it makes sense how it could develop and it could manifest itself in a way to where you're reading more into it. But here's what I want to know. So you're spot on, right? Like again, 99.9%. Now, am I going to claim that I've never been passive aggressive toward my wife in some way?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to claim that. That's not my style. But every once in a while, like, fine, I don't care, you know. But what caused you at a young age? Was it? Do you think it was a part of a relationship with your, you know, dad or brother or whatever it was? Was it spending time talking and kind of understanding the way that, you know, men kind of think about things? What was it that caused you at a young age to be like, I think he might have just forgot, right? Instead of assuming or kind of allowing yourself to be pulled into this idea of like, no, let's get to the bottom of this mystery.
Yeah, like I said, I grew up with an amazing father, so I think even just then I knew better. I just knew that he wasn't the kind of guy who would go out of his way to be devious. Like, okay, I really don't mean this as an insult. Like I said, I love my dad, definitely a father's girl, but he's the most simple man I've ever met in my entire life. I aspire to be as simple as him. I wish life would be so much better, but he's so simple and he loves my mom so much. There is no way that he would spite not clean a bathroom.
Yeah. Yeah. Not within his repertoire of
But at the same time, and again, this isn't me like roasting my dad. It's so weird how complimenting my dad is like starting to sound like roasting him, but he's also a very average man. He has never been like a top tier earner. Dude is like riddled with health issues, practically disabled, you know, epileptic, has a seizure a year at least. But you know, that also taught me that the average simple man can be a great influential figure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Independence Day is coming up. And you know what that means? It means we're going to celebrate America's birthday. And the way I plan to do it is with Good Ranchers, because Good Ranchers has a new deal out. If you go to goodranchers.com, use promo code Nick, you're going to get up to $100 off your order with your subscription, not to mention the fact that you can get free brats for a year. That's right. Goodranchers.com, promo code Nick. When you're celebrating Independence Day, when you're celebrating resistance to tyranny, shouldn't you do it with some of the best American meat out there? Yes, you absolutely should. That was a rhetorical question. You know you should. So goodranchers.com, promo code Nick. Sign up for one of those subscriptions. You're going to get that special deal of up to $100 off your subscription plus free brats for a year. Goodranchers.com, promo code Nick. Go check it out. Yeah. Yeah. There's something to be said for someone just being a good man.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because I'm kind of unpacking this too, with trying to understand like how women process things as well.
Me too.
Do you do you think some of it, like, so for instance, there's the joke that women love women love the like murder mysteries, right? Like women love, true crime and the whole feel. So do you think part of that is this idea of there's an excitement associated with it? And when you look at, obviously when you're breaking something down, and it was funny because my dad was a homicide detective. So like we've actually
awesome.
discussed cases and things like that. And there is something exciting about getting to the bottom of how something was done. What was the motive? What was the method? Like, why did they do this? What's the message behind that? And all of us experience that on some level, right? Like my guilty pleasure is like watching something on YouTube about the, like, how did they really build the pyramids? Like, you're saying they did it with, and again, for me, it's like, yeah, that's a mystery. Yeah, that's confusing. And okay, is there something to the fact that like there's this measurement or whatnot? Do you think it's the same for a lot of women? Do you think it's the same way in the positive attribute would be an enormous amount of empathy or sympathy or understanding motivations or getting to the bottom of something and seeing how things are connected? And do you think like a negative manifestation of that is turning everything into some sort of true crime scenario where, simple things are now turned into something far more complex because it's more exciting that way?
Yes and yes. It's funny. I actually do have a womansplaining episode on why women love true crime so much, and it was featured on Dr. Phil.
Oh, wow.
But I do think so much of it is because women tend to be more details oriented than men. We see this manifest even with things like, your cousin calls you to tell you that he just got put in the hospital. You get off the phone in 5 seconds and your wife is immediately mad at you that you didn't ask 5,000 more questions. Like, You're like, I know all I need to know. What more do you want from me? And they're like,
hospital,
why is he in the
pray
hospital?
for
How
him.
many
Got
stitches? Yeah. Yeah. So we see that all the time. But on the broader note, absolutely it manifests itself in so many negative ways. In so many ways. Like, I believe they did a study. I wish I could cite the exact study, but they were basically asking people how bad they think certain situations are. And then they compared the general average answers with the facts. And what they found is like people in general think things are so much worse than they are. Like when it was like how many people died from the pandemic, like people thought it was way worse. How bad do we think, global warming really is? People thought it was like way worse than it actually is. And same with like men. I think people are not realizing that it's only 1% of all men that make up for the majority of violent crime. So that means the grand majority of men, you don't have anything to worry about. But then these things lead us to the whole man versus bear debate where because we watch so much true crime, we're like, well, all the bear can do is kill us and a man can do so much worse. And it's like, well, that's just because there's not enough true crime on bear murders. But if you
clearly you haven't seen Cocaine Bear.
The Cocaine Bear was actually really tame compared to what actually happened to people who have been murdered by bears. Like, I don't think you guys understand, like, the bear wants to keep you alive while they eat you for as long as possible. So it could be days. It could take multiple days of you getting eaten by a bear and then covered with dirt so that they can come back to you later and then they eat some more of you. Guys, it's really not that simple, actually.
So one of the things my wife and I did when we kind of moving into the relationship side. So one of the things my wife and I did that we found super helpful, because again, getting married at 19 and 20, I had just joined the military, like no money, like anything, right? I think at the first year we were married, I was clearing maybe $1,200 a month. And this wasn't 1974, right? Like this is 1998 or 1999 is when we got married. But I remember one of the first kind of like arguments we really got on. Now, I mean, we used to like argue and debate. That doesn't bother us. But the first time it was like, okay, this is a fight. We're mad at each other, right? And she told me, you need to talk to me like I'm the woman that you love. And to this day, I remember that. remember that we can have a heated discussion and whatnot, but I need to talk to her like she's the woman that I love. And probably, so that was the first fight. Second fight that we kind of got into, whatnot, I remember telling her, I'm not responsible for what you meant. I'm only responsible for a reasonable interpretation of what you said. And like to this day, those two things stick with both of us, right? It was this idea that, okay, when I'm talking to my wife, I cannot, even if it's heated, even if I think I'm right, I should not say or do anything that would cause her to question my overall love and commitment to her. And she, when she's talking to me, she shouldn't just say anything to score points. She has to understand that I'm only responsible for interpreting what you actually said. And so you need to be careful with your words as well so that you're properly understood. And don't say something that's going to cause me to, because you don't get to come back later and get mad at me to say, well, I didn't mean that. Like, I don't care what you meant. This is what you said. And this is what I heard. And okay, yeah, that makes sense. And I found that really informative, that what I really wanted from her was the idea of, facts matter. And it's not that feelings and emotions don't, but facts matter. And when you say certain things, I'm going to reasonably interpret what you said. And that point of like, I need to protect that security my wife has, that I love her and that we're okay. And even though we're mad right now, like I'm not leaving, I'm not walking out, because again, we both came from broken homes.
Yeah.
And I just found that had a huge impact on the way that we communicated, where I came her way and understanding her needs with respect to, when we're going to, and she understood mine. And it was that give and take that have allowed us to go through a lot of difficult conversations and decisions over 25 years of marriage, because we had those agreements.
I think that what that highlights is the importance of being able to set boundaries in a relationship and how necessary that is for communication. And also to be able to hold yourself to the same standard that you expect to hold the other person to as well. And I think it was very, very beautiful the way that you both were able to do that, right? Because when she spoke to you that way and said, you need to speak to me as the woman that you love, she was doing so because she was also committed to speaking to you with that same respect, and when you said that to her, that it was with the exact same understanding that you could hold yourself to that standard. And I think a lot of people, the biggest, I'd say like 90% of relationship issues come from miscommunication. And so setting those boundaries and kind of making those almost rules in communication that you both commit to, really, it does set the stage for so many more years down the road. Like I always tell people, some of the rules that me and my husband had kind of established for our arguments pretty early on was, this one was my husband's, but no leaving. Yeah. That was one thing. It's like, sometimes I would just get like so frustrated that I would just walk out. And finally he was like, please, you can't do that. With me, you can't do that. Like, we gotta, if you want to like walk into another room and take some time out, but like, we gotta figure it out. And I appreciate that. So no leaving, no yelling. We can't yell at each other. No empiricals. So no always or never.
Ah, got it. Yeah.
Keep those out of there. And then sometimes it's unavoidable, but try to make it as unavoidable as you can, but bringing up the past.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes it's relevant
very
to the
necessary,
conversation.
Maybe.
Yeah. Sometimes it's relevant to the conversation, especially when my wife's had to do this before, where it's like, look, I'm not bringing up the past to bring it up. I'm bringing it up because this is pattern recognition.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
Like you're bringing up something relevant to the discussion that we're currently having about, whatever it is. And I get that. But yeah, I think, the boundaries component is important. Now, let me ask you this, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because, obviously coming into a situation where, again, you have there's a relationship that exists in the home prior to you entering into it. And that's between father and son. And again, you went into it with this attitude of, I'm going to be incredibly respectful of, his biological mother. But what was that like, navigating that aspect of coming into a relationship where there's one that pre-exists you? There's a pre-existing commitment that's pretty significant. and fitting into that, because it looks like you guys have pulled it off very well.
Yeah, and I think those are I think those are some of the pitfalls that a lot of people face when trying to date a single parent. Is a lot of people really struggle and wrestle with not being the number one priority, or they struggle with how close the two are, they get jealous or something like that. For me, it was, I had mentioned earlier, but I really wasn't even trying to date at the time. And I was so focused on, projects in my life and building myself up that it actually had kind of worked out at the time that we both had kind of other focal points as we very organically, naturally got to know each other and figured out, oh, wait, we actually are a really good fit in each other's lives. And I guess a lot of it is that I didn't try to force anything. I wasn't like one of those, hey buddy, like don't you want to just be bestest pals? And
Yeah.
it's kind of like let him come to me. I really involved him in a lot of decision making. So at
Mm.
first I just came around as like a friend, and I actually even asked him, I was like, how would you feel if I became your dad's girlfriend? Like, I totally was at the time, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I asked him just to like introduce the idea, and he was actually like really stoked about it.
Yeah.
So that's when I knew things were good. He actually, this is a really cute story, but he actually proposed to my husband for me.
Oh,
He actually
really?
asked him, Daddy, will you marry Miss Lauren?
That's awesome.
And I was like, wow. So, but I joined some like stepmom groups back in the day, and I used to lurk and read what other people were saying. And I think just a lot of people, they do try a little too hard.
Yeah.
They're like, why won't he like call me mama and then whatever my name is? And it's like, don't force the kid to call you mom. That's
Yeah.
weird. Like, some of them just try to push their way a little bit too into it. There are, even though I am a stepmom, there are some step monsters out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a thing, oh my God, I think one of the most horrifying things I've learned being part of stepmom groups, there's a term that stepmoms use for their partner's daughter called mini wife syndrome, where they're
Oh,
convinced that the daughter is trying to replace them.
really?
It's it's a weird twisted, like we were talking earlier about assuming the possible, like the worst possible intentions, and
Yeah.
they're like, yeah, I don't like that she tries to make decisions over me and that she's always trying to cuddle her dad when I am. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't think you should date a single parent
Yeah.
or have kids.
Well, so speaking of that, there's a new trend out, and I think you were actually featured in the article as well. The what is it? The hot dad summer.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh, yes.
yeah, the hot dad summer. So apparently, more and more young women are seeing like young single fathers as something that's potentially desirable, because you even said it earlier on. It's like, hey, you get a little bit of insight into does this guy make for a good dad, right? And you get a little insight into that. So do you think this is something that's just kind of, I don't know, one of the things that social media is making more of a big deal, or do you think that more young women are kind of breaking with this trend and kind of embracing the idea, like, no, I want to be a wife, I want to be a mother, and hey, look, watching a let's say a younger father with their younger child is really attractive.
Yeah, I don't think it's a trend at all. I actually think that this is a tale as old as time. And if you really pay attention to actual social trends, you'll see that this has always been prevalent. There's a term for it even too. Um well, I guess there's a couple terms for it. First of all, they're starting to call the dad stroller candy. I feel like that's some good
No,
vocabulary.
I did not. Stroller
Yeah,
candy was not in my quiver of
you gotta load that one up
yeah.
back there. But
Stroller candy.
no, there has always been something biologically rooted to women being attracted to fathers. And I think a lot of what it is I mean, when you become a parent, it unlocks this carnal part of you that you did not have access to before. If you were not able to
Yeah.
kill a man before,
Oh yeah.
you can now after becoming a parent. It's everything inside of you changes. And I think that women can smell it. I think it's in the pheromones a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
bit. Like they can pick up on it. And it's not just the kids either. There's another term, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, called mate poaching,
Oh, that sounds a
where
little bit more nefarious.
yes, studies have found that women are much more likely to engage in mate poaching,
Huh.
where they are more attracted to men who have already been vetted by another woman.
Got it. Got it. Wow.
Yeah, men don't need that same vetting process. They're like, hot
Yeah.
enough for me. That's great. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but for women, that if they see a man, he'll be just a man. But if she sees that man date a beautiful woman, he is more attractive. Just
Sure.
by
Sure. No, I
proxy.
mean, I can understand kind of a status and competitive thing is there. I will say one of the things that I remember my wife, who like way too hot for me, right? And in high school, like this made no sense. I mean, I can attest to this. When I left for basic training, I told her, I said, hey, you're free to date other people because I mean, clearly I'm not going to date other people. I'm in basic, right? But you can, because I was so convinced there was absolutely no way a girl this hot is going to stick with her boyfriend through basic through 3 months of like basic and airborne school and all. Like that's just not going to happen. I've seen the movies, man. This doesn't happen, right? So I
You're
was
waiting
trying
to
to
get
like,
Dear John'd.
oh yeah, I was in the military. We have this thing that we call Jody, and we sing cadences to it. Like your mother was home when you're left, you're right. Your father was home when you're left, you're right. And Jody was home when you're left, sleeping in your bed where you. I mean, like we would like run cadences to talking about how somebody is home stealing your girlfriend. Like that was.
It'll motivate you though. I just ran
Oh,
a 10K and there was a guy with a sign that said, "Remember when she cheated on you."
oh, dang.
Got the people going.
Oh, it is. Yeah, no, it can be excellent for the gym. But so anyways, like I had this idea that there's no way she's going to stick with me. And it was this whole idea of kind of like testing her on that. And, I forget where we started this conversation at. I started going into military cadences. But it was this idea that, yeah, I'm actually, where did we start this?
You were talking about how your wife is too hot for you.
Yeah. But when I left to go to basic training, I forget where we started, like the whole point of this, but when I left to go to basic training, it was this idea that, she was too hot for me and that couldn't be explained. Oh, that's what it was. She was too hot for me. Couldn't be explained. Had no idea why she was with me. And then later on, I did find out that she goes, one of the things that I always found really attractive about you is I'm the oldest of 9 kids. At that point,
Oh, wow.
I was the oldest of, I think 6, or maybe it was 7. Maybe it was 7. And, now it was my dad and my stepmom had 7. My mom and my dad had me and my brother, and then my dad and my stepmom had 7 more kids. And so I had little sisters and little brothers that were, little twin sisters that were much younger than me. And I always, like to this day, it is second nature for me to, when somebody has like a baby or whatnot, I'm like, I'm not the guy that doesn't want to hold the baby, right? I'm the guy that does want to hold the baby because like it reminds me of when I was, the big brother and the whole deal. Cause I am quite a bit like my brother's 3 years younger than me. My sister's 10 years younger than me. And then my youngest brother is 2 years younger than me.
Oh my God. I'm so afraid that's going to end up happening with me because my oldest is 15. My youngest is 7, but I'm still like, I kind of want to do it.
Yeah. No, it's true. But she told me later, she's like, this whole idea of I saw you around little kids, when we were dating, before we were dating and the whole deal. And it was always this thing where you were always just so attentive and you would play with the kids and the whatnot. And
it is a thing. She
found it really attractive. So it was like, oh, okay. So you were just looking at me for the daddy potential. That's what it was.
All right. So listen up, gentlemen going out to basic training. You start kissing those babies. This is your insurance.
Yeah. Be super nice to your younger siblings and stuff like that. But So do you, here's the other thing I want to ask. Cause, again, like my co-host Christian is just, and we constantly tell him, I'm throwing him under the bus right now, but everybody that watches our show will tell you that he totally deserves this. He has gone so far deep into this idea of, modern women this, modern women that, and, I'm never going to find anybody because, again, I'm not 6'5", blue eyes, working finance. And one of the things that we keep telling him is that, look, there is a trend. I really believe that there is a shift taking place, kind of with Gen Z, where I think there's a lot, it's becoming a lot more pronounced if you see women on social media and whatnot that are really, really tired of being defined by the guests on the whatever podcast, right?
Oh my gosh,
or on
yes.
Fresh and Fit. Like it is insulting to them that is the representation of women going out there to social media. Do you think we've still got, like, for the young men out there that are looking for, whatever, some encouragement or just to be able to predict what's happening next? Do you think we're due for 7 more years of famine, right? Or do you think this is something where a lot more of the women that like despise being thought of that, they don't want to be the, whatever, the man-hating girl boss, right? They it doesn't mean they don't want to be, powerful and capable and maybe, but they don't want to be that version of it. Do you think the trend is starting to go in the opposite direction, or do you think we're still going down this road of, pretty healthy man-hating for some time?
I think that I would definitely agree with you that the average woman, the vast majority of women does not hate men. They're nothing like these women on the whatever podcast. And you definitely have to understand that, like, these guys just basically walk around Miami clubs and pick up whoever got rejected at the door, hand them a red Solo cup full of liquor, and hope for the best. Like, this is not.
And they don't disappoint, right? Or they do, depending on how you're looking at it. Yeah.
It's not the average woman. Unfortunately, though, I would say that I don't really see there being like an uptick in it being cool to like men.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just really tricky too, because I go online and obviously I cover a lot of partner shamers, but what really drives me crazy is when I see partner praising a woman saying, "Wow, look at this. I got home from a trip and the house is beautifully clean and my husband cooked dinner." And you go to the comments and they go, "Yeah, that's his job."
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? Yeah. Like, so we can't even like be proud of our husbands. You're still going to turn that into a negative thing.
Well, and how miserable is that woman, right? Like, how miserable is that woman right now just with this? Because I don't get it. And you said something early on that I think explains so much of everything. And that is, are you assuming positive intent? Are you assuming good intent or negative intent? And if you're going to assume negative intent, guess what you're going to get a whole hell of a lot more of? Negative intent. You will become a self-fulfilling prophet.
Yes.
Because I was on there's this women's magazine called Ellie. And it's more on it's more on the kind of the traditional, concept of femininity and whatnot. And she was asking me about chivalry and is chivalry dead? Because you're starting to see more of these cases where there'll be a woman in the subway saying, I'm standing and none of these men have given up their seat. And I will tell you right now, I'm sympathetic to her frustration because I would give up my seat and I was raised to give up my seat. I've raised my son to give up my seat. But I'm also a little frustrated with the presumption of, I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need no man. Why are you opening the door for me? I can do it myself. Unless you do want the door open. And then it's like, oh, you better be right there, Johnny, on the spot to be Captain Chivalry. And I said, look, here's the point. You get more of what you reward and you get less of what you punish. And that's not a man thing. That's a humanity thing. But the thing that I tell men a lot is you still got to choose to be the chivalrous guy, right? Like, you still choose that, because that's not just a reflection on society. That's not just a reflection on culture. That's a reflection on you telling culture, you're not going to change me into something that I'm not, simply because it's not getting the best attitude right now. So What do you think with respect to this idea of, again, the rewarding versus punishing, and why do you think it has become so common for, again, a woman to say, well, yeah, that's his job, he should have been doing that anyways? Like, why is that so prevalent, and how do we get away from that?
Like I said, it's so much of it has to do with like the viral talking points that become this constant poison in our minds. Is how many times have you heard bare minimum, and if he wanted to, he would, and if he won't, some other guy will, and like enough of that, it just makes you almost, it makes it impossible to be happy with a man, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because at this point that you reach where being treated well is the bare minimum, which I can appreciate to a degree. Obviously, you should not even date a person if they don't treat you decently.
Yeah.
But when you get to this point of like, well, yeah, that's just what you're supposed to do. And I could find someone who can do it better if you don't want to step up and try and do it better yourself. Is like constantly having that attitude is always going to prevent you from just the simple joys in life. And these are the simple joys that I kind of wish women could learn to emulate from men. Like I said earlier, my dad is like the simplest guy I know, but he's also a really happy, chill dude who is not neurotic or full of anxiety and depression. And I wish that, we could kind of take a lesson from that in a lot of ways. Oh shoot, I was going to go off on a point with this. I forgot where I was going, but what did you originally ask me? It was about
Well, yeah, just the idea of how, like, again, why does it happen, and how do we, well, first of all, to the extent that, again, all of us, whether you're a man or a woman, if you go into a relationship with us, if you go into a relationship demonstrating gratitude toward your partner instead of entitlement, you're going to be happier. That's true of every aspect within life. Like
yeah.
I work outside the home. My wife predominantly works inside the home. When she cooks dinner, I thank her every time. I don't say, well, yeah, bare minimum, right? When I, bring home a paycheck, she doesn't say, yeah, bare minimum. She says, I really appreciate how hard you work for our family. And that gratitude just, it builds on, it's the same thing. The stacks are going to build, right? You can build entitlement and a sense of, I'm owed this, or you can build the side from gratitude. And it really is on some level a choice. Well, let me ask, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's kind of like how earlier I was saying, we flew a little too close to the sun. And it's kind of like how uncool it is to praise men. That's immediately seen as like, oh, you're trying to center men and we're trying to deconstruct the patriarchy. And so any kindness that you show to men is a point in the patriarchal bucket, and that's going to hold us back. And so now that's taking us to this very extreme point of, we'll even hear people, I don't know if you ever saw that one viral video of the woman who's saying, I refuse to thank my husband for doing chores around the house. I'm not going to thank him, because men need to understand that it's their role to play a part in the domestic labor too. And it's like, why are we not recognizing that mutual oppression is not the answer?
Yeah.
If you don't feel like you're being thanked enough, just say that. But that doesn't mean take away all gratitude.
Yeah. What I feel like on some level, this is cutting off your nose to spite your face, because
Mm-hmm.
the physical reality is, and I actually saw somebody mention this on, in fact, I think it was on the Whatever podcast, right? But he was saying, well, look, if men decided that they did want to be the horrible brutes that they're being portrayed as, they could be. And somebody was saying, well, I don't think that, they would do that. I think there would be a huge political backlash. And he goes, well, there doesn't seem to be in the Middle East. And it kind of took her aback. And he goes, see, that's the problem. You're operating off of this assumption that the way things work right now are just that's the natural thing. That's not the case. And I will say this, like, I get slammed sometimes on social media when I'm talking about step up, be a better man, be a better husband, be a better father, conduct yourself with chivalry and honor. and guys will just, they're acting like they're calling me the pick me, right? Oh, you're a simp.
Yeah.
Right. And I'll look back and I'll be like, no, I'm not a simp. I appreciate my role and responsibility to love, cherish, and honor my wife. And I'm going to raise my kids, to have similar expectations within their own marriages. But one of the things I genuinely, I never worried about this before, but I look around at what some of the things that are going on in the manosphere, and I'm thinking, holy hell, they're going in a direction that you want to see what misogyny really looks like. Like you could. And the thing is that guys like me and guys like, John Lovell or Tim Kennedy or, some of these other guys on this side where we're very, very big on, masculinity is a good thing and you need to develop it, you need to hone it. We're going up against other guys now that almost see us as traitors. It's like, don't you understand how bad they've gotten? Don't you understand this? Like this, you're part of the problem because you refuse to understand that they need to be taught a lesson. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it's crazy when you're standing there looking at those guys going, no, you have an obligation to be honorable. And at the same time you're doing that, feminists are saying that you're the problem. And sometimes I'm looking over at the extreme fourth wave feminists going, don't you understand what I'm trying to prevent from happening? And I don't think they do.
Yeah, it's a very super ego level of thinking to overcome that, because I completely understand the frustration that a lot of these young men are facing, because while they've always got some man in their face somewhere saying, you have to treat women with respect, you have to hold the door open, you should be a provider, you should be strong, all of these things. I think that these young men are getting so frustrated by the fact that there is no female equivalent. Like there are no female role models out here saying remember to treat men with respect and remember to be decent to men and remember to be soft and kind and sweet, because they really need some kindness because they labor very intensely. No one is telling that to the young women. They're being told literally the opposite. We don't need men. You can do it all on your own. They're just going to hurt you anyway. They don't really love you. And a lot of these men are like they said, they want you to start teaching them a lesson instead. Why are we giving them stuff they're not giving us? But it's the exact same thing that I said before, this whole argument of, well, we were mistreated in the past, and so naturally we should just continue to mistreat everyone else. Not the correct answer.
Yeah. It's kind of this whole idea of revenge instead of, kind of moving forward together. Well, let me do two more points here. One thing I want to ask you about is what do you think? So again, I believe in my heart I still think that at some point things are going to turn around, and I'm starting to see certain things within Gen Z that are interesting to observe, and I can't quite make sense yet of what exactly is happening, but it seems like something's happening. Again, one of the things, a lot of the things that you talk about, and one of the things that I find so impressive about the way you discuss things, from a male perspective, is just how reasonable you are on these things. It's not as if you're giving a pass to all men, right? It's not as if you're saying that, oh, men are just so wonderful and they always get it right, and it's like they're great and they are our masters and we must walk 2 feet behind. You're not saying any of that. You seem to have a genuine appreciation for the role men play, and you seem to thoroughly enjoy the role you play as part of a marriage. And I see that with my wife, where she calls out the best attributes in me, right? She makes me, I said this once in an event it was probably about an audience, it was about 75% women, younger women. And I said, look, it is not your obligation or your duty to make men good men, but you would be shocked at how big an influence you play in that. There are things that my wife can call out the absolute best, most noble, bravest attributes in me in a way that nobody else on this planet can. Right next to that would be my kids. And so how do you see us or your role in not only advocating for men, but showing women that the role they play in that relationship, in that marriage, they have so much within their power to call out all of the things that are going to make their lives so much better and their relationships so much more rich.
Yeah, like I said, I think at the end of the day, the ultimate point that I just keep hammering away at in various different ways by covering different topics is that no relationship is going to work unless you assume positive intent. Stop immediately assuming that everything that they are doing is negative. Um, it's tough though. Um, I'm trying to think of like where exactly I want to go with this because it's so loaded. The differences between men and women, what exactly I want to explain to women, but there's just so many different ways I want to remind them that these men are not trying to hurt you. And it seems like such a crazy concept that you even have to say that. Like this man that you found that you either mutually pursued or dropped the handkerchief for,
Yeah.
this man that you've exchanged rings with, God, how long's it been? He still doesn't want to hurt you.
Yeah. Yeah.
just trying to believe that. And it's tough too, because a lot of the work is trying to convince men of the same thing. She really is not entering this marriage planning to drain you of your pocketbooks and any emotional. That's really not the truth of it. And it is tough, being reasonable people in these spaces, being reasonable married people. It's rare. It's rare what we have actually making it work for longer than 7 years, which is the average length of a marriage. Especially because everyone's looking for role models. And I think the most radical people in the feminist spaces and the most radical people in the manosphere spaces are able to appeal to the disenfranchised, the women who have been hurt by men, the men who have been hurt by women, and they're able to kind of get them in. And then once they're in, it almost doesn't matter what radical, crazy things that they're hearing. So I always try to be aware of that and try really, really hard to not become one of those voices similar to your channel. It's so aggravating when I try to make a point of like, women, when we do this, it's harmful to men. Let's try to be aware of that. And then a man comes in and goes, yeah, this is why I hate women. I'm like, that
was not helpful.
It's not what I wanted you to leave this video thinking.
Yeah. I've noticed that I think you're right too on highlighting the positive. I love to make jokes about my my relationship with my wife, and like building up my wife. I like to do that.
Yeah.
And I've had people that say, I disagree with you on everything, but I'm here because I love how much you love your wife. And I do think, again, another one of the reasons why I think your channel very deservedly continues to grow is not just the useful information and the explanations, but the humor. I think humor is one of the best way to convey information, especially tough messages at times. But I also think that there is a desperate need in this space for who you surround yourself with matters, and the messages that you listen to matter. And when people are able to say, especially when it's not what might be the Disney version, of course, that doesn't even mean what it used to, but it might not be what we call the ideal version of, young boy, young girl meet each other in high school or college and then get married and, have kids. There can be a lot of mess in between now with things that are happening in the way of the culture, but that doesn't mean that you've missed out on having the sort of ideal marriage that you want to. but how are you going into it? And I think you've articulated this several times in a way that makes a lot of sense. And that's, if you're going in not assuming it's as simple as not assuming ill intent.
Yeah.
And
doing the work to find out the why,
Yeah.
It's just so interesting how many times we go through life seeing some bizarre thing that our spouse has done. And so many times people just don't even ask, why did you do it like this? Or what
Mhm.
was the reason? Are you saving this for something? And I can't tell you how many times that things like that have just resolved issues in my relationship. Let's say I get mad at my husband because I'm like, hey, you told me that you were going to do this, and I noticed that you didn't do this. And I could just have been mad about that. But then because I take the time to talk to him about it, I find out, like, oh, I actually reprioritized this because I got a part that I needed for this project that you actually told me to do 7 months ago. So, so you just gotta talk to your partner. Go figure. Who knew?
Yeah. Well, and I think for men too, one of the, again, the thing that's been so helpful for me in my marriage and with respect to communications is the fact that I know that when I have a conversation with Tina, if I bring up facts and evidence, she's going to receive that, right? She's not, and this was hard for me because I remember one time I was having an argument with Tina, and look, I kind of argue for a living, right? I'm in politics, right?
Right.
Like I argue for a living. And I always kind of like prided myself on this idea that I'm going to make an unassailable argument. And I remember this one time I was just being condescending. I was being really condescending to her, and she was right. Right? She wasn't just right about me being condescending. She was right about the topic. And I had just been so sure that I was right. And I remember, and part of it, what it was, is my wife was saying, she goes, I don't know why, but there's something wrong with this. And it's one of those areas that I learned early on in marriage, is like, when your wife has discernment about something, listen to it. She might not even be able to fully explain it just yet, but she senses something, she's picked up on something, and that's real. And I think one of the advice I try to give to men and young husbands is there are so many things that you might not be able to understand because you were designed to kind of perceive things a little bit differently. And it's not that yours is better or hers is better. One might be more advantageous in one situation versus another. But I will tell you this much: the more you communicate and share with one another, there is no amount of capability that you have by yourself that is not enhanced by an incredible woman working together in concert with one another toward shared goals. And if you just accept that this is going to be, it's collaborative, not competitive. I'm not competing with my wife. Like, my wife has certain skills that brings to the table. And what a fool I would be if I thought that, well, no, that's something that falls into my realm, or that, no. What a fool I would be if I wasn't taking full advantage of all of the capabilities that she brings to the table. And how unhappy would she be if she wasn't taking advantage and appreciating those things? When my wife every once in a while, one of the best compliments my wife has ever given me is when she looked at me and she goes, "You make me feel safe." Oh man. Yes. It was that simple. And by
that's
the
how
same,
you know you nailed it.
and by the same token, like, paying attention to certain things and certain dates, because it's not natural to me, right? I'm moving on, and what am I responsible?
Oh, yeah.
But paying attention to certain things, like the other day, a song came on, and I said, "That's the song you wanted me to hear when I came home from Iraq in 2006." And she looked at me like, "You remembered that?" I said, "Oh yeah, I remembered that."
Aww.
And so I want guys to understand, right, that this is, for all the crap that you're hearing out there. I get it. Maybe sometimes it's entertaining. Maybe there's some value in listening to some of it. But if you're not also giving equal time to channels like the Dadvocate, and understanding that there are a whole host of women out there that might not have the same platform as somebody showing up on, Fresh and Fit, but it's growing, right? And it's growing because it's positive, and because it is showing that there's another side to this where men and women are not in competition with one another. We see the value of that collaborative relationship. And I'm very grateful for the work that you do. And I think that I mean, I'm sure you understand the impact that you're having, but to hear it from a guy that's also operating in this space, it's not just beneficial for, helping people understand relationships. I do think it gives hope to a lot of guys out there that recognize that, no, what I bring to the table is still valued.
Yeah. I do hear that a lot. I will say that. Some people ask me if I get like a ton of criticism, but I will say overwhelmingly, those are the kinds of messages that I get from people who are like, either, you've helped me in my relationship or marriage. Maybe you helped me get out of a bad relationship when I needed help seeing those red flags and warning signs. And also from a lot of guys who have said, like, you give me hope.
Yeah.
Because, I'm an average person too. It's not like I crashed down from Krypton and I'm part of a rare breed of alien who likes men, Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because as your channel has been growing a lot lately, and I'm going to encourage everyone to go over and follow the Dadvocate. You got your website, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. Like, you're on all the platforms, right?
I'm actually not on Twitter.
No, not on Twitter. That's why you seem so happy.
No, I do go in and lurk sometimes, but no, I don't actually have
Twitter's
one.
tough, or X.
I have Threads though.
Okay, so is it all like what is the handle for everything? Is it Dadvocate or
the Dadvocate okay. On everything? I'm pretty easy to find.
Okay,
but not on WhatsApp. If any Dadvocate ever tries to send you to WhatsApp, there's some scammer.
Oh yeah.
Don't give them anything.
I love those where it's like, I keep, or the worst is when someone said, hey Nick, I sent money to that charity you asked me to. Like, wait, what?
No,
I did not. Okay. So all right. So people can find you on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. And your website.
That's all of them.
Right?
Yeah.
And your website.
I do have dadvocate.net.
Dadvocate.net. I'm going to encourage all of my listeners, go over there, check it out, follow it. Again, you're going to get a lot of good information. It's a lot of like very, very witty wisdom. It is good. If you're a young woman watching this and you're wondering like, why the hell does he do that? Chances are you've got a video for that.
Yes, I can help.
Okay, great. Well, listen, hey, thank you very much for the time. Thank you very much for the work that you're doing. Again, love to have you again on the podcast sometime. Please give our best to your family. Any closing thoughts on your end?
I don't know. I would love to come back though. We should definitely do this again sometime.
Okay, great. Well, everyone, again, if you haven't already, go out there and go to the Dadvocate. Again, you're not going to be disappointed. Great channel. Once again, Lauren, thank you very much for the conversation. Best to you and your family, and to all of our audience. Thank you very much for watching. By the way, go ahead and check out the show notes page. Join our online community. A lot of the episodes that we do are based off of what our audience members have specifically requested, not to mention the fact that we got some other features that we are going to be rolling out here in the next several months, and the online community is going to be the one that sees it first. So once again, thank you all for joining, and we will see you next episode.